Well, the Pittsburgh Steelers are getting ready for their final preseason game heading into the regular season. We've previewed that already. We've talked about who you should be looking for, the fact that Dwayne Haskins is starting. I want to get you guys a bigger picture look at the Pittsburgh Steelers, and who better to do that than a guy who worked in their front office for many years. Doug Whaley is going to join the show. We're going to get to that in just a minute here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things in the Pittsburgh Steelers. Remember, you can download us on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or Odyssey, anywhere podcasts are hosted. Really, check us out there. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques. But joining me today is a very special guest, a man who worked side by side with Kevin Colbert. He was in the process of recruiting Troy Polamalu, Lamar Woodley, Lawrence Timmons, several of those Steelers greats of those 2000s team, a Super Bowl champion himself. We have Doug Whaley, pro personnel coordinator of Pittsburgh Steelers and a former GM of the Buffalo Bills, joining the Locked On Steelers podcast. Doug, how are you enjoying your summer, my man?
First of all, thanks for having me on, Chris. It's an honor to be a guest. Enjoying the summer. Enjoying the heat for sure. I know a lot of people are going to be complaining about it, but think about it. In about 2 months from now, we're going to be complaining about the cold. So I just take every season and try to enjoy it as much as possible.
See, I'm right with you, Doug, because I'm a guy, I will sweat my butt off. I've been at Pitt training camp. I've been at Steelers training camp. I'll take the sweat as long as I don't got to scrape off my car in the morning.
Hey, coming from Buffalo, I totally agree. Trust me.
I can't imagine what it's like in Buffalo, man. I have friends from there, and I get his stories. You can also hear Doug Whaley on his weekly show, Wednesdays with Whaley, 9 to 10 a.m. on 93.7 The Fan here in Pittsburgh with Colin Dunlap, Chris Mack, and Jim Colony. Doug, you've been a long-time person who's scouted talent. You were there when Ben was drafted with the Pittsburgh Steelers. You've seen his development over the years, and you even gotten a chance to sort of keep an eye on things from afar. Since you left the organization. I wanted to give you the chance to talk about where you see Ben Roethlisberger and the Pittsburgh Steelers this year, because there's a lot of national media that is just saying, "Oh, they're done, they're finished. 5-12 is coming. They're going to fall off." But it never happens under Mike Tomlin, and he's a guy who you saw in the building. He has never had a losing season. Even when in 2019, when everyone said, "Okay, this is the year they're going to fall apart," they still managed to get 8-8. I don't get why people think this Steelers organization is going to just crumble out of nowhere. Is that something that you always think is kind of crazy when you hear that?
Well, it's crazy when you look at it from a Steelers point of view, but in my life, I was always taught in any situation, flip it and look at it from the other side. So if you look at it from a national media side, you have an aging quarterback that is coming off a season where his yards per attempt, he got the ball off quick, returning from an elbow surgery. The older you get, the more injury prone you get, not the less injury prone you get. You add into the fact 5 new offensive linemen. None of them has started in that position before. One of them that projected starters coming off a major knee injury. Then you look at the defense. You have one cornerback that's coming back with any starts. You're going to have 2 corners that haven't started, and it's a pass-happy league. And then your inside linebackers coming off a major knee surgery. So if you look at it that way, then there's going to be a lot of questions of where can this team go? How far can it go? It's really going to be on the impetus on not only Coach Tomlin, but those assistant coaches. Adrian Clem, we're going to find out what he's all about real quick. Terrell Austin, what's he going to be? Is he going to be able to develop those 2 new starters on the secondary? Actually, sometimes it's going to be 3 if you go dime. And Jerry Osowski and the linebacker coach. You've traded for Schobert, and you have Bush coming back off of a knee surgery. So there's a lot of questions out there. What you don't question will be the receivers, the tight end, and the outside linebacker. They did a good job there. And then the running back has shown that he's going to be legit. He's going to give you a return on your investment of that first round pick. But think about it. If this team was, you take Steelers off it and you throw on, let's say, Indianapolis Colts, there would be questions, correct?
I agree. Yeah.
No. So
yeah, that makes total sense.
And now for me, for Ben, it was less of a question about Ben, more of a question about Matt Canada and what is going to be the offensive identity. And what he showed last game when Ben was in, I'm not only impressed with Canada's offense and what he's going to try to do, but Ben's acceptance of that and trying to excel in it. I think Ben, what he showed last week, showed that he's back to the Ben that we all know and love. And in my opinion, he's going to, knowing that he's getting older and he can't rely solely on his physical abilities, his mental capabilities are going to start showing and taking over. So you're going to see a smarter Ben.
I agree too, because that's the thing, is that he can't, like you said, he can't be the guy. Even though we did see in the preseason game against the Lions, the one play where he like ran around, spun around, and found Eric Ebron down the field, even though it was a drop pass, it reminded everyone like, whoa, that's the Ben Roethlisberger we remember from like Super Bowl 43. But he knows he also can't do that all the time. He's going to have to win with his brain. He's going to have to read things before the snap and take advantage of things. And that's where that we're going to have to see progress in Matt Canada's offense. But I agree with you, in just a very small sample size, we saw an efficient Ben Roethlisberger who understood where to go, when to go with his offense, and figuring things out, even with a brand new offensive line that was their first time even starting across from each other with all five of those guys, and a new running back in Najee Harris. I wanted to get your opinion on this too, Doug. There was a lot of hoopla leading into the draft, and I say hoopla because that's just a funny word. But when a lot of people were saying, don't draft a running back, don't get Najee Harris, it will doom the team for many years to get a running back. What was your take as a person? You've scouted players over the years. You've been there in the war rooms. What was your take on the whole getting a running back and a Najee Harris to balance out the offense?
Your job as a personnel department is to collect talent, the best talent at the value you believe in. So people will say, don't take a Najee Harris. But what if their next rated player was not as good as Najee Harris? And if that player, say you pass on Najee Harris, and that player you pick, whoever it is, doesn't live up to that first round grade or that first round pick, then who's pointing and saying, oh, you should have taken the running back? So the point is, they picked that player because at that time, that was the best player on their board. But it happened to coincide with a need. I disagree with not picking a running back in the first round, as long as he's worthy. Now, what I say is you really have to study and be really cognizant of the fact of giving him that second contract. But the first contract, because of the rookie salary cap, it's not going to eat up that much of your overall salary cap. So for me, I know it's a low-hanging fruit, and a lot of media people like to pick on that and say, well, you shouldn't do it, and maybe the analytics show it. But for me, the combination of skill and the need, it was the right pick for the Steelers.
I felt the same way too. I was banging the Najee Harris drum, since the end of college football and the end of the season, when it was obvious they wanted to improve the run game. And it's tougher to improve the offensive line in 1 year when you got to make so many changes, but you can improve the running back position with one real guy. And that's what he looks like to be. Are you impressed with what you've seen of Najee Harris so far? I know it's very limited, and he really hasn't had a whole bunch of carries. But I mean, as a person who's watched him in training camp, I'm in awe sometimes by not just how he is athletically, but how he is professionally when he talks to us in the media and how he carries himself as a young man.
Because he came from a professional program. Make no mistake about it. Alabama's a professional program. If anybody's ever been there, I've scouted there many a time, they run a more stringent program than most professionals do. That Nick Saban has those guys prepared. So am I surprised? No. His skill set is there. He knows how to be a pro on and off the field. Now the only thing I haven't been able to see, and it's just because I haven't been at practice and he's had limited snaps, is his blitz pickup and his pass pro. I looking at him coming out of college, there's that 1-2. But the hardest part of being a running back in the league, especially being a rookie, is identifying and being able to pick up those blitzes.
That's been impressive. And one thing that Mike Tomlin said that spoke out to him in all the practices was whenever they did backs on backers, and you know how physical that could get with the practices over the years. Whenever they did backs on backers, not only would Najee Harris step up and say, I'm going in there, he would say, I want Devin Bush. I want this guy. I want that. He would call out the biggest and baddest guys the Steelers had. And that's what Mike Tomlin was most excited about.
And that's very exciting. But again, the thing that we have to find out, the blitz recognition. When he's on the sidecar and they have a blitz inside, which one does he pick up? Does he know when to switch it? And the communication with the offensive line to identify the mic and who's most threatening. Those are those nuances of the game, the mental part of the game that is very difficult for a young running back to pick up. If he can master that, then the sky's the limit for the guy.
Absolutely. I want to get Doug's thoughts on where the Steelers are in their division, in their conference, in the league, comparatively to the talent we see across the NFL. We'll do that in the next segment, just after I tell you guys about Built Bar. It's the healthy treat that tastes like a candy bar, but is truly the best protein bar for you. It's the official protein bar of the U.S. track and field team, and it comes in so many different flavors, whether you want a free snack like raspberry, strawberry, or orange, or something different like salted caramel, cookies and cream, Rocky Road, or my personal favorite, double chocolate. Built Bar has all the flavors for you to enjoy. And the best part, they're all healthy. They range from 130 to 180 calories. They pack 17 to 18 grams of protein, but only 4 to 5 grams of sugar and 4 to 5 grams of net carbs. That's a tasty and healthy snack that'll save you from eating that snack you'll regret later and stay on task with anyone's diet. Order today and get your favorite flavor delivered right to your door by going to built.com and use the promo code LOCKED15. That's LOCKED15, LOCKED15, all capital letters, all one word, and you'll get 15% off your next order. Again, that's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm Chris Carter here with Doug Whaley, breaking all things down on the Steelers. Now, Doug, the Steelers finished as AFC North champions, but they lost to the Browns in the playoffs. The Ravens and the Browns both advanced to the divisional round of the playoffs, while the Steelers did not. And there's a sense, like we said, like you brought up all the reasons, a makeshift offensive line, not so sure what's happening at cornerback. Ben Roethlisberger didn't finish the strongest last year. There's legitimate questions as to how this team is going to move forward. But when you look around the league, and we'll start with the AFC North, when you look around the division, do you see them as a team that will be legitimately competing for the division title, or do you think the Browns and the Ravens, the Bengals to me are obviously a team that's still in the middle of a rebuild, but the Browns and the Ravens are the two teams everyone seems to be pointing at? Do you think that they've surpassed the Steelers, or do you think they're all kind of neck and neck, like, hey, they have their own things to figure out?
I would say right now they are neck and neck, but I'd give a slight edge to Baltimore for what they did on the offseason. A lot less question marks around that team. They've been there before. The stability from ownership to GM, even though DeCosta's his second, third year, he's been there forever, the head coach. Then I think the true battle is who's going to be between Cleveland and Pittsburgh. Cleveland has that question mark. I think they're going to have 9 new starters on defense.
Yes.
Same with Pittsburgh, with 5 new starters on the offensive line, 2 new starters at corner. So those two are going to be battling for that second position, right? In my opinion, right now, all things considered, because the biggest unknown is health. Injury is the biggest question mark for every team in the NFL. And when you look at it, the teams that get to the playoffs in advance, they win that war of attrition. And injury is a war. If you can stay healthy, that's winning that war of attrition. So I think long and short of it, I right now give a slight edge to Baltimore, Cleveland, and Pittsburgh fighting for that second spot in the AFC North.
You're absolutely right about the war of attrition, because that often determines how teams play. I mean, the Buccaneers were a 7-5 team before their late season bye week, and then all of a sudden they got healthy. Tom Brady started playing better. Their linebackers were all there, and then they went undefeated for the rest of the season and eventually the Super Bowl champions. that it's crazy in football how that can be such a storyline, but then we step back and when a team fails to get to their ultimate goal, people say, oh, this person wasn't good enough, or oh, this person let this down. I think that football is one of, maybe the most important sport when it comes to injuries playing a huge storyline and stopping even some great teams. Like when you think back to the Steelers teams of old, the 1976 Steelers, some people say that would have been the greatest team of that decade had they not lost Franco Harris and Rocky Blyer for the playoffs. But then they ended up losing as the Raiders went on to win the Super Bowl that year. And you could look over the past 10 years for the Steelers. Last year with Joe Hayden, Bud Dupree, Devin Bush, you can go down the line with guys they didn't have. Ben Roethlisberger the year before that. Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell not showing up. I know that wasn't injuries, but still that's something that they didn't expect. 2017, they lose Ryan Shazier. 2016, they lost all their receivers except AB and Le'Veon Bell in the AFC Championship game. 2015, it was all the killer bees were destroyed by Vontaze Burfict. It's a consistent theme. I think people often put that to the side when we talk about what makes great teams. Oftentimes, it is the fortune and the luck of being healthy.
As they say, sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. And then most recently, does Tampa win that Super Bowl if Kansas City has both their starting tackles? You might be able to go in a game and do a lot schematically to cover up one tackle that's out. But if you lose both your starting tackles in the Super Bowl, you're fighting a gunfight with a slingshot. I mean, it's tough.
Exactly. No, it's
very tough.
Even if that slingshot is Pat Mahomes, if you're going up against one of the better pass rushing groups in the league, you're in a lot of trouble. So again, I think the thought process is always to be trying to be healthy, like Tampa. By end of November, by December, not only be healthy, but hitting your stride and peaking at that time, that December, January football time frame, that's when teams start to separate from themselves. I absolutely agree on that. Now, I wanted to get your perspective on some of the top teams across the NFL. First and foremost, the Chiefs seem to be the perennial ultimate favorite so long as Patrick Mahomes is quarterbacking and they don't lose both of their starting tackles 2 weeks before their big game. Are they still the top team for you in the NFL, or is there someone else that has put themselves in the conversation like, hey, you still got to watch out, maybe the Buccaneers, Aaron Rodgers being back with the Packers, your former team, the Bills? Is there some team that's saying, hey, we deserve to be in that conversation at number one, or is it still Patrick Mahomes as long as the Chiefs are healthy?
I'm saying right now, it's Patrick Mahomes as long as they're healthy. Tampa Bay, because you have a Super Bowl team that's returning all 22 starters.
Yes.
That's very impressive. That, especially in this era, I don't know the stats or I don't have anybody to research. I would say, to my recollection, that's the first time a Super Bowl winning team is returning all 22 of their starters. So they're nipping at the heels, and the only reason I would put Mahomes above Brady, which I shouldn't do, and everybody's done so many times before, is he can't keep doing it. I mean, he can't just keep running.
We keep saying it, and he keeps doing it.
He keeps saying it, absolutely. But guess what? One of these years, we're going to be right. So you got to be right.
Right. Listen,
exactly.
The broken clock is right. I guess with Tom Brady, we're right once a day. We're not even right twice a day. But one day, he will fall off the proverbial cliff.
So I would give the edge there, because of what Kansas City obviously did in the offseason. But if Tampa has injuries, is Brady in that position to overcome those injuries as much as Mahomes could overcome those injuries? Obviously, you saw in the Super Bowl, Mahomes couldn't, but over a long season, can he? After that, I want to talk about something that a lot of people haven't talked about, and that's Aaron Rodgers' inability to get past the NFC Championship game.
I was going to bring that up.
No one has talked about that at all. And this is why I say, whoever his publicist is, or if it's him, he's a master of changing the narrative. Guess what he did as soon as that game was over? Why didn't you give me the ball on fourth down? Oh, I should have ran it in for a touchdown on third down, so I didn't have to put it in his hands. As a dominant quarterback in this league, you always want the ball in your hands. And he says, oh, then that fourth down play. But no one's talking about the third down play. No one's also talking about the second NFC championship in a row at his home stadium, Lambeau Field. And the second half, Tampa turned over the ball 3 times.
They did. The Packers gave them a shot. Yeah, the Packers defense gave them a shot.
And if you're the MVP, if you give Brady 3 turnovers at a NFC championship game in Tampa or AFC in Foxborough, and you turn it over 3 times, you're not walking out of there victors.
Nope.
So again, no one's talking about his inability to get to the big dance. And I applaud him for making sure no one will, because he's putting it on the organization of Brian Gutekunst in Green Bay treating me wrong. It's beautiful. I mean, I'm going to say, if I'm ever in that position, I'm saying, hey, give me your publicist or be my publicist, because you can. He's a Teflon guy. He is. It's unbelievable. But I say all that because they'll be in the mix. He's going to have to prove to me that he can overcome that. Seattle, I think, is always going to be in the mix. They're there. I am really intrigued on a different way than San Fran. A lot of people are saying San Fran's a great team, even though Jimmy G, when he's in there, they win. When he's in there, he's not in there that much.
Yeah.
So you're gonna, and then you're gonna throw in Trey Lance. We'll see what happens with him. So I'm not as high on them. The Colts, it's going to be a solid team. I struggle with a quarterback that is so mentally fragile that when you bring in somebody for not even competition, just to make the team better, to have a backup quarterback to make the team better, he goes in the tank. And this is nothing that I've talked to anybody there. Never been around Carson Wentz in that way, but you hear all these reports. And if the reports are true, though, that's not the mental makeup of a Super Bowl winning quarterback. So I struggle with them. But yeah, I think it's going to be the Chiefs, the Bills. Bills will be there. I just don't see what they did in the offseason to close the gap with the Chiefs. I just don't see that. I know they invested a lot in their defensive line, and they're going to have to be able to step up and put pressure. But if you look at a lot of their draft choices and investment on the defensive line, they're more edge guys that can rush the passer or small, quick guys. They're not stout guys. So we can get in this later. We're going to talk a lot about Pittsburgh and Buffalo this first game. But I just don't see them closing the gap. But they'll be there. Baltimore, Cleveland, they'll be there, like I said. Tennessee is going to be intriguing.
Yeah.
You throw in A.J. Green in that mix. They did lose Jonnu Smith. But with Derrick Henry, A.J. Brown, and A.J. Green, I mean, those guys – and Wade Tannehill's playing. I mean, Julio Jones.
Yeah. I didn't want to like stomp on your point, but I knew who you were talking about, and I think anyone listening would know. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Julio Jones. Sorry about that. AJ went out to Arizona. So they're going to be in there. I think the sneaky player is the New England Patriots. Think about
again.
This.
Come on, man. We just got done with those guys.
Think about this. If Cam or Mac Jones can do what they do. And Cam didn't play well last year, and they were very close to making the playoffs. Think about that. Think of how many of the defensive players had opted out. Now you get all those defensive players back. You get Cam coming back another year in that system, another year off that shoulder injury, or Mac Jones beats him out. I'm just saying. And what
Doug,
they did on the
you're hurting
offseason,
me, man.
and the best coach in the game today.
Absolutely. There's no doubt about that.
So,
I think you also bring up a great point about Aaron Rodgers, because when he beat the Steelers in Super Bowl 45, I think everyone penciled in, okay, this is about to be the decade of Aaron Rodgers. He'll be back. Yep. He'll win like 2 or 3 more of these by the time he retires. And here we are, probably a few years away from him retiring. And we're like, he hasn't even been back to the Super Bowl. And like you said, master of spin, maybe that's just what it is. It's like, it's not about me, it's about those guys and these guys.
It is. Yeah. Don't talk about my inadequacies. Let's talk about them. And they made me do it. As I always tell people, I've never been wrong. And if the times I did, my wife made me do it.
That's how you get out of it. That's the smart.
That's how you get it. Yeah, exactly.
Now, Doug, I want to keep talking with you about, we're going to switch topics back to the Steelers and a former coworker of yours, Bill Nunn, who just got inducted to the Hall of Fame. We're going to do that in just a minute. But first, I want to tell our listeners about betonline.ag. It's that time of the year again, and all eyes are turning to football as teams are back on the gridiron to start the football season. As always, BetOnline is your #1 spot for all the pro and college football action this season. Get all the updates on odds, props, contests, including the $500,000 NFL Mega Contest and the $200,000 NFL Survivor Contest, both open right now at BetOnline. Head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today and receive a 100% welcome bonus. And be sure to take advantage of their opening day super promo, which is make a bet on the Thursday, September 9th season opener between the Super Bowl champion Buccaneers and the Dallas Cowboys. And if you lose, your wager will be refunded up to $25. This can all happen right at betonline.ag. It's the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. betonline.ag, your online sportsbook experts. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, wrapping things up. I'm Chris Carter here with Doug Whaley, longtime NFL exec of the Steelers, GM of the Bills. I want to talk to you, Doug, because Bill Nunn getting inducted into the Hall of Fame, as a person who just simply read about Bill Nunn and all the things that he meant to the organization. Now, all I've done is read and hear stories from the guys that I talked to within the Steelers organization. I never had the honor of meeting the man. I never got to sit down with him and let him lecture me. And I've heard hilarious stories of how this man led his life and was just so blunt with you, no matter who you were. What was it like working with a man who changed, to me, not just the game of football, but the world and how things worked?
Truly an honor, truly a blessing to be able to pick the brain of a guy that was the forefront of modern day scouting, but also a trailblazers for minorities in that scouting profession. To be one of the people that anybody in that Steeler era of the 4 Super Bowls, but even past, he is mentioned as a stalwart of the Steeler organization, along with the chief, along with Dan Rooney, along with Joe Green, along with Ham, along with Bradshaw, along with Bill Roethlisberger. You're going to throw Bill Nunn's name in there. So to be able to have conversations with that gentleman and him to be able to depart knowledge on not only the profession, but how to be a Black man in society and strive and be better and get to where you need to go, it is something that you couldn't even pay money for, because it was just so valuable to what I accomplished, not only in the profession of the NFL, but as a husband and a father.
That's one thing I always hear about Bill Nunn, too. He didn't just talk to you about football. He wouldn't just be like, oh yeah, this guy is a great splitter. This guy does this right. Watch his technique here. He would talk to you about life. And I've heard that he just would casually just name drop. Oh, like Jackie Robinson. Like he would just call him Jackie. And if you didn't pick up on that, he's like, what's wrong with you? Keep up with the story. Like I've heard these many things about Bill Nunn. What were some of the best stories or best lessons that you learned from him as a man that helped you grow as a person?
But you always have to look at it in the prism of when he was coming up. He was one of the first African Americans on the road as a scout. And he'd say, I'd go in a hotel and they'd check me. As soon as I check in, I wouldn't give them the option to put me on the second floor in the back corner. I'd say, I want a first level floor room right around the door, and squash that. He says, when he was flying back in the day, that was in the 60s and 70s. Flying was more of a, I don't know how to say it, but more of a upscale thing than today.
Like a luxury.
So people, yes, luxury. People had suits and ties on. So here's an African American that most of them, he would go in there and say, oh, you got an upgraded seat for first class? How about? He says, you never know until you ask, and a closed mouth doesn't get fed. So he carried himself as if he belonged. And he says, if you walk in there with respect, people will give you respect. And the biggest thing I learned from him was, it's great to have a mentor. It's better to be a mentor. So there's so many stories that we could sit here all day, but it was more the philosophy of how to live your life, that every story he told had a point about that, be it professionally, again, or personally, or the battle to where we had as minorities to get to where we are now. And for me to have a chance to be an African-American general manager in the NFL, I owe it to a person like Bill Nunn that opened the doors for me to even get a thought of as a possibly being a general manager in the NFL.
That's what I eventually wanted to get to, because, Bill Nunn opened doors for HBCU athletes back in the 70s, but also, for talking to people like you that got to work next to him, he was a person who was probably helping you figure out how to progress in your career. And I mean, you're, again, as a Black GM, you don't see that every day in the NFL. I mean, yeah, sure, there's guys out there like Ozzie, but that takes a lot of courage on your part to step out there and not just put yourself out there, but to do it for 10 years with the Steelers and working in that personnel department, and then taking the shot. I'm going to go to another organization and make my mark here. That takes a lot of guts. And I mean, to me, it puts you in the lane of, hey, I'm here to inspire and pave the way for people behind me as well. So that you can carry on Bill Nunn's legacy, and what a legacy it is that still exists today.
And the biggest thing he taught me was patience, because he always said, be patient, know your craft inside and out, and be prepared. So if you get that opportunity, which won't come around obviously twice or that often for African Americans, you're prepared to do the job. He would always say, he started noticing we'd have this internship program, and interns would come and go from intern to director, assistant GM in 2 years. And he says, those, because they haven't learned the business inside and out, to when you get there, you can obviously tell people, I've done that before and I know what it takes to get it done. So you have a better judge of what it takes to do the job, but the capabilities people in that position doing the job. So he said, never be in a hurry. Take your time. I would rather you sit here for 10 years and then another 3 or 4 years in Buffalo before you get that. So you have a chance, because the higher you get in any profession, and especially as either a coach or a GM, the less you do of what got you there. As a general manager, you do a lot less scouting, but scouting is what got you there. So you have to rely on experiences and the people under you to give you the information so you can make an informed decision. And again, it's based on 2 things, information and experience.
Doug, I feel like I'm learning a whole lot right here, just sitting here listening to you talk, man. This is amazing. We got to wrap the show because we're way over time, but I wanted to thank you so much for coming on the Locked On Steelers podcast. It's been a pleasure and an honor to have you here. We'd love to have you back sometime, maybe during the season, getting some of your thoughts on how the Steelers season is progressing or regressing or however it is going. But because we know how topsy-turvy a season can be, man. You've been there when, everything's looking great or everything's looking bad, and then all of a sudden, whoop, it's the other direction. And all of a sudden you're either a Super Bowl contender or you're figuring out, how did we get here and why are we struggling for the playoffs?
The best reality TV is sports, because you never know what's going to happen, and that's why you got to tune into the game.
Absolutely. Doug, thanks so much again for joining the Locked On Steelers podcast. Follow him on Twitter at Doug Whaley 9, as you see below his name right there. If you want to listen to more of Doug, he's on every Wednesday on Wednesdays with Whaley from 9 to 10 a.m. on 93.7 The Fan with Colin Dunlap, Chris Mack, and Jim Colony, right on 93.7 The Fan, local Pittsburgh radio. Check them out. They're also on Odyssey, which is one of the places you can catch this podcast, the Locked On Steelers podcast. Catch us on Odyssey, Google Podcast, Apple, Spotify, or YouTube. If you're watching us on YouTube, subscribe to our channel. It really helps us out. Also, leave us 5-star ratings on Apple with positive comments, getting you a shout out at the end of the show. That's our week here with Locked On Steelers. I'll be back Saturday recapping the game for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and we'll be talking about that then. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll be back in your ears very soon.